All right, folks, here we go with the notes for Chapter 23, Managing Your Voiceover Business, dealing with some of the money aspects of what it is to run your own business as a voice actor. The big thing that a lot of people are going to ask you, how much do you cost? So we need to talk about setting your talent fee. The first and most important thing that you need to know about setting and negotiating your fee, that should be fee, not feet. Hopefully you can negotiate your feet. But setting and negotiating your fee is that you have value. Let me say that again. You have value. You have something to offer that is a value to your client, and your client needs what you have to offer. You have value. And because you have value, you should be fairly compensated for your work. Don't be afraid to ask for what you think you are worth. Be careful, though, not to rush into accepting any voiceover work that is simply based on what the client is offering financially without first doing a little bit of research. Now, what we need to know are not just the fact that it's a job and they're willing to pay so much money. You need to know some of the details and the circumstances of what is going to be expected from you. Those things need to be clearly defined before you agree to the job. How long is the copy that you're expected to read? What kind of copy is it? Does it have a lot of larger medical terms and other challenging types of words? Does it require you to do several different character voices? Does it require that you do your own editing? You need to know all the different nuances of what you are expected to do. How long is the script? Is it a 30 or 60-second commercial? Is it several commercials? Is it an audio book? How much time are you going to be investing in the job that you're being asked to do? And keep that in mind when negotiating your compensation. The second thing you need to know about setting or negotiating your talent fee is that your time is valuable. You've made a considerable investment of time and energy to get to a place where you are ready to market yourself as a professional voice actor. So we've already talked about the time investment in doing the job itself, but the time investment in terms of your training and your development in learning and practicing skills, that is important to consider as well. Just like most places will pay people more money if they have higher degrees, you generally expect to earn more if you have a master's degree as opposed to a bachelor's degree. Well, the more time that you've invested in your craft, the more, in theory, professional you are, know what you're doing, have a certain competency and skill. So the time spent in developing that is also very valuable and should be worth something to the client. If you plan to get paid for your voiceover work, and you should, you'll need to learn some negotiating skills. Now, as a voice actor, you are in business for yourself, and because of that, fee negotiation is part of doing business. Think about any other sort of contractor that is out there. One of the ones that might be most prominent to think about would be certain types of construction types workers, home improvement, plumbing, heating, what have you. And whenever they come out to look at a job that they're going to do for a homeowner, they provide to the homeowner an estimate of what the materials and the labor is going to cost. Now, depending on the person that you're working with, there may be some room for negotiating and trying to get a discount on the work that is being offered. We're talking about the exact same thing here. You set a rate, and you may find yourself in a situation where the client wants to negotiate that fee with you. And that's the decision that you need to make in terms of whether you're willing to negotiate and how much you're willing to negotiate. But you should start by considering what you think you are worth and asking for rates based on that to begin with. An often overlooked consideration when setting fees is the investment of time and money in getting started in voiceover. We've talked about the time, but it also takes a financial investment. You have to pay for acting classes. You have to pay for the equipment in your home studio, microphones and audio boards, computers, internet access, sound treatments for the room that you are using, paying for different subscriptions to things, a business checking account, the fees associated with that, the fees and taxes associated with starting a business from a legal standpoint. All that costs money, and all that comes out of your pocket. So when you're in business for yourself, you want to be able to cover the expenses of your business as well as being able to keep a little change in your pocket. So it's only good business to expect a return of investment on the things that you have invested in, whether from a financial standpoint or from a time standpoint. And in order to see a return on your investment, you need to consider those expenses as you determine your fee structure. Now let's evaluate the job requirements. One of the things that you will see when you get into the world of voice acting is that you're going to find yourself in situations where you're dealing with people that are hiring voice talent for the first time, or it's not something they do on a regular basis. They're going to be inexperienced. They're going to be uneducated in the world of audio production and voice recording and just in voice work in general. Other producers working with clients may be eager to maximize their profits and may be willing to take advantage of beginning voice talent by trying to hire them at lower rates. So whether it's by innocent ignorance or by people trying to take advantage of you in one way or another, people are not going to be automatically willing to pay you top dollar for your work, which again emphasizes the need for you to determine what you are worth and what your minimum standards are going to be in accepting work. The purpose of a negotiation is to arrive at a level of compensation that is mutually agreeable to both parties. See, the bottom line here is that in business, everything is negotiable. We kind of live in a day where you don't do a lot of haggling on price when you go to a car dealership. That's something that's by and large has gone from the wayside. But it used to be a thing where you would see what the sticker price is on a car. And, you know, if you as a customer like a certain car and you go into this negotiating time with the salesperson to determine what you are going to pay for in terms of what the car is actually going to cost. If you don't negotiate on the cost in terms of dollars, maybe you negotiate on getting added features to the car, certain creature comforts inside the vehicle, or perhaps a larger, more powerful engine or something like that. Maybe you negotiate getting some extra perks like free oil changes or a more expansive warranty on the vehicle. So really everything is negotiable. And again, you need to have a sense of where you stand and what minimum standards you are willing to accept as you move into the negotiation process. Don't necessarily put out there that you're willing to work for X dollars if X dollars is the absolute minimum that you want to work for, or Y conditions is the minimum standard. Start higher so that in the negotiation process you can whittle down to what your accepted minimum is going to be. It's not uncommon for clients to offer a fee that at first glance may appear reasonable, but upon closer examination is little more than minimum wage for a considerable amount of specialized work. This goes back again to that idea of considering the scope of everything that is going to be expected from you. The more that you have to spend if you're doing post-production, the more that you might be required to do certain callbacks without added compensation. Those things all add up. They add up in terms of eating up your time, which would effectively reduce your overall hourly rate. It could also eat up your own personal resources because you're the one that's paying for your own travel. You're the one that's paying for your food expenses when you're on the road. You're paying for anything and everything outside of whatever is happening in the recording studio if you're using someone else's studio. Or you're paying for the equipment that you're maintaining yourself. You're paying for the electricity that runs that equipment. So keep that in mind, that you really need to take a look at what the rate being offered is and if it's really worth it. You must have a very clear understanding of your involvement in a project before you can realistically discuss price. Before you can provide a realistic estimate or discuss your talent fee with a prospective client, you need to know as much as possible about what you will be doing. Lay it all out there. Have it laid all out for you. Ask as many questions as you possibly can so that there's no surprises. You need to know the going market rate for comparable work, and you need to place a value on your time and your performing abilities. One good place to start might be using the union rate card to determine what other actors are being paid for similar types of work with signatories. If you're in a smaller market, there's other ways that you can research what the going rate is for certain types of work. And then you need to determine if that's your minimum standard or if you are willing to work for less or if you expect more. Think like an entrepreneur. Your objective as a business owner is to make a profit. And to do that, you have to be smart about how you use your time and your energy and how you price your services. In the end, at the end of each month, you want to see more money coming in than you have going out. And the amount of difference between those two is going to determine how viable of a business you have in voice acting. In other words, can you pay your bills and enjoy a little money for yourself? In terms of setting your fee, again, if you are a member of SAG-AFTRA or another performing artists union, for the most part, this is going to be set for you at least to a minimum standard because your talent fees are going to be set by the union by what are called SAG-AFTRA scale fees. These are the things that you would see on the union rate card. These posted talent fees are not negotiable and are considered as the lowest level of compensation. So you are, as a union member, entitled to get paid no less than union scale. However, you can always negotiate for more. Before you begin any sort of realistic negotiation, you need to establish a fee schedule that outlines your specific fees for specific types of work. This is another place where the union rate card can come in handy because the rate card is going to take a look at different things that could be additional opportunities for income. What do you get paid for retakes and callbacks? What do you get paid for certain amounts of content over X number of pages or X amount of time? What do you get paid for something that is an industrial versus a commercial? Those sorts of things. It's good to use SAG-AFTRA as a starting point and determine how you fit into that in light of what the various possibilities may be. Only you can determine your personal value as a freelance voice actor. The process begins by identifying the type or types of voiceover work you are best suited for. What are your strong suits? What do you excel at? What can you truly put out there as your best foot forward and tell people, I excel at this. You should hire me for this because I'm just so good. So know who you are and market who you are. Then once you've figured out what you do best, the next step is to identify the market price for comparable voiceover work in those areas. Now, we mentioned that SAG-AFTRA has the union rate card. That's a good place to start. But you may want to see what different talent fees are for certain non-union talent in certain markets. And there's some resources in the textbook, various websites that you can go and take a look at what other people are doing. And that can kind of give you a sense as to where you think you might be willing to fall in terms of what you offer in comparison to the competition that is in your particular area. A common mistake made by many beginning voice talent is to treat their work as a commodity, basing their work solely on price. You are more than just a dollar sign. You're a person, flesh and bone. You have needs, just like any other person, and it's something that you strongly need to consider. That it's not just a simple exchange per se of I give you my voice, you give me X amount of dollars. There's a little bit more that goes into that, and some of the things that we've talked about in terms of your training, your investment of time and money and equipment. All those things come into play when we're talking about these things. One thing that you may be tempted to do is to get a job simply by undercutting your competition. And this idea of lowballing, well, it might get you the job, but the practice does wind up doing a disservice, not only to the voice talent accepting the fee, that is you, but to everyone else in the business as well. In other words, if union scale for reading a commercial is $300, and it probably is somewhere around there at this point. I haven't looked recently at the rate card, but it should be around there. And you come in and you're offering to do something for $200. Well, it might be good business if you're able to still make a profit and do those sorts of things. But you could also wind up hurting yourself in the foot because the next person that comes along and says, well, you only charge the other person $200. I want it for $200. Or you could wind up setting a culture where people expect quality work at those low of prices. And instead of creating a culture where appropriate compensation is happening for now and for the future, that you're regressing in that as opposed to progressing. So it tends to lower the bar, and it can only result in lower quality work at cheaper prices because you get what you pay for. And if you're going in to do work for less than what you're worth, you're either going home with a smaller paycheck or you're trying to round up more work in order for you to make an adequate living. And if you're doing more work, then you're doing work quickly. You're trying to get a lot done at one time. And if you're cramming too much stuff in, you can't possibly do quality work. It's going to suffer. So, on one hand, set your own fees, but also make sure that you're setting fees at what you are worth for your sake and for the sake of the professional industry as a whole. To get and keep the best clients, you need to develop a high perceived value and to provide excellent work at fair and competitive prices, not the cheapest price for all the reasons we just discussed. When you have this conversation with your client, you may be better off by offering a higher fee to start and negotiating to an acceptable middle ground, so that you get to the point where when you come to the place where there's a mutually agreeable pay rate, that you are not having to go below what your minimum acceptance would be in order to obtain that work. Start higher and work your way down so that you have a little room to play in going down until you hit what your minimum would be. Here's some considerations as you set your personal talent fees. First, your experience and your abilities. The more skilled you are, the more likely you will be able to demand a higher fee. Second, your prior experience and your clients. Have you already done some work for a few satisfied clients? If so, their names may help you to establish credibility and help you to justify a higher fee, because this basically substitutes for your resume. People want to know what you have done recently and what you can do for them. Another consideration, the client's budget. Your challenge as a voice artist is to offer a service that is superior and more effective for the client than what they can get anywhere else. In other words, you need the work, so don't necessarily charge an exorbitant rate. But be willing to work with the client. Sometimes it's not just about the money that you receive. If there's potential that working with this particular client could help boost your reputation or boost your prominence in the industry, it might be worth taking a few dollars less in order for you to be able to add this client to your portfolio. But at the same time, unless you're doing something kind of as a favor or because you have a certain passion about who the client is, what they does, the issues surrounding what's going on or whatever, sometimes, quite simply, the client just can't afford you. And that's a harsh reality of business. And sometimes we need to be willing to walk away from something. Speaking of, can you justify the fee that you set? If you market yourself with professional print materials, a dynamic demo, awesome website, and all sorts of other marketing materials, you had better be able to meet the level of expectation of your client when they book you for a session. Make sure the presentation of yourself is as good as your performance in and of itself, and vice versa. Consider your market. Non-union talent fees vary greatly from market to market, so in order to set an appropriate fee for your services, you'll need to find out what other voice actors are getting paid in your area for similar work. Pay attention to what's going on around you. Think about it like when you're shopping around for different items in the grocery store. Let's say you're going to buy a box of cereal. If grocery store A is selling the box of cereal at a much higher price than grocery store B, and it's the same product, you're probably going to go to grocery store B unless grocery store A offers some sort of stellar experience that it's worth paying the extra money for that box of cereal. Same thing with you. If you are offering quick turnaround, low number of takes, that you're personable, easy to get along with, you're flexible in taking direction, you maintain a positive attitude when you're in recording sessions and when you're dealing with client problems, they might be willing to pay a little extra for you if you deliver a quality product. But you also don't want to shoot the moon when you have no right holding the gun, if I can put it that way. Now, what about all that equipment that you have? From a business standpoint, it makes no sense to set a talent fee that does not at least take into consideration the cost of your studio equipment or your office supplies, your marketing expenses, the training that you are continually doing, producing your demos, especially if you're having them done outside of your own studios, and all these sorts of things. You have to recoup the expenses that you create as a business owner. So keep that in mind when you're setting your fee. Something else to keep in mind is that an hourly fee for studio time is standard practice for just about every recording studio. And if you as a voice actor are working out of a home studio, it makes good business sense for you to use a similar pricing structure. So if you are offering not just your voice, but basically A to Z complete, give the person a package that's ready to go, pay for that post-production, make them pay for that post-production time as well. Now, you could maybe argue that if it's just a simple voiceover and a couple minor edits and things like that, maybe you include that as part of your package that you offer. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But keep in mind that editing can take up to 3, 4, 5 times as long or more than just voicing something. Because you have to listen, you have to make judgment calls on what's usable and what's not usable. Maybe you're taking an element from take 1 and coupling it with an element from take 2 and on, and all of that eats up time. So don't be afraid to charge studio time fees or production fees if you are also involved in that process. Now, when it comes to the agreement, whenever you exchange your time, energy, or services for money, the only way you will be protected is if all the details of the business arrangement are detailed in a written contract. Don't be trustworthy enough, or foolhardily trusting, I should say, to just handshake on a deal, especially if you don't know the client very well. And even if you do know the client well, even if it's your best friend, you want to get everything in writing. It protects you. It protects them. One of the ways that you need to make sure that there's certain protections for you in a written agreement is that you need to make sure of how your performance is going to be used. What are they going to do with the recording that you provide? How long are they going to use it for? Those things are all negotiable points. Some other things to consider. You want to make sure that you have adequate controls for tracking any restrictions. Can they take a voice that's meant for one thing and use it for another? Can they take what you recorded and use it out of context? Can they use it for a project that you don't really have a lot of knowledge about? And if there's any other terms and conditions and restrictions that are important to you that you include in the contract. And then there also needs to be written in there course of action or recourse for any remedies for violations of the agreement. Whether they violate them against you or you violate them against them. It keeps everybody honest. In negotiating your fee, the ultimate purpose of any negotiation, again, is to create an agreement that is acceptable for all parties. You win, they win. You get an advantage, they get an advantage. It's mutually beneficial. And a proper, effective negotiation is going to see a win on both sides for both parties. Some effective negotiating tactics include, simply talking about the project. Ask as many questions as you can while avoiding any discussion of your fee. Just talk about the work in and of itself. And as you're talking about the work, start kind of keeping a mental list in your mind, or even write things on a scratch piece of paper and say, okay, so I'm doing this and this and this, and they want it this way and that way, and this is what the end product's going to be. This is how the project is going to be used. Talk about all of those things. And then when it starts getting time to talk about compensation, do whatever you can to get the client to mention the first number. At an appropriate point in your conversation, you may ask what their budget is for the project, and then wait for them to answer. What this does is it gives you information about where they're at, what they're willing to pay, and hopefully you also get a sense of what they're able to pay. And you can compare that with what you think you are worth, and then you have a basis for negotiating the compensation for the project. A good tactic to use is one called echo and pause. What you do in using this tactic is to repeat the price that your client offers with the tone of a question, and then stay silent. It's possible that the discomfort of the silence may cause the client to offer an increased fee. It's kind of the verbal equivalent of poker face, if you will, using a little bit of psychology. And when you repeat the number exactly the way they say it, but phrase it in a question instead of a statement, it allows for a little bit of processing on their end, and they may perhaps be willing to bump up a little bit more. Finally, book this job at full fee with a discount offer for the next job. This is a tactic that you can use if the client is a bit squeamish about the offer that you are making. What you're trying to do here is present yourself as a professional that knows what he or she is worth, but you're also still willing to work with your client to create a win-win. So it's kind of that idea that, and the way that it's said here in this particular way, charge full price the first time, then offer a discount for the second time. Number one, it presupposes that you'll be getting a call back for additional work. But it also allows for someone to not take advantage of you the first time around and then never use you again. So you're protecting yourself that even if you do only get the one job, they never come back to you, that you are being compensated fairly for that original job that you were hired for. So we're going to take a break here, and we'll do the rest of the chapter in part B of this video. So check it out, and I'll see you over there.